Hi guys, it's Asha here from Encore Pilates and Wellness. Welcome to part 1 of a 10-part series that I've created. We're going over foundational Pilates principles. Today's video will be talking about the femoral spiral. Hopefully I would have already taught either a reformer or a mat class with you and you have a fair idea of this concept. If not, that's totally fine. The props that we'll be using for today's class are, I'm going to be using a marker. If you have a pair of hedgehogs, you can use these. Otherwise, if you don't have any of these fancy Pilates props, you're more than welcome to not use it. You can still feel what I'm talking about. It won't be as exaggerated. It might just be a little bit more subtle, but please join in. So without further ado, let's get on to our mats and let's get started. Okay guys, so I have a pillow that I'm going to use just for a little bit of head and neck support, and then I'm going to go ahead and lie supine flat on my back. Grabbing onto my markerloo. If you're using a markerloo, you want to take off the timber base, or if you have a hedgehog, you just want to turn it upside down. And I'm going to pop the bumpy sides into the mat and popping the flat part of the hedgehog on my sacrum. So in the small of my back, behind my pelvis, there's your sacrum. It's kind of like a small kind of triangle or palm size area. And that's just going to elevate my hips off the ground, and from here that's going to give me a little wiggle room as I drop the right side of my pelvis down to the ground and bring it back up, and drop my left side of my pelvis down to the ground and bring it back up. So what I'm going to do here is just remind my body how my hips move in the socket. So as my pelvis drops to one side, one hip drops up deeper into the socket and the opposite hip lengthens away. So if you don't have the hedgehog, you can just simply allow the opposite hip to lift and you'll still get this sensation. So really it's not just an in and out of the hip, just do a few more on each side. It's a figure 8. There's almost like a swivel all the way. It's like down, up, around. Big figure 8. Good. And then we're going to come to our neutral pelvis position, which is somewhere in between. And then from here we're going to tilt our pelvis up the other way, tilt our pelvis down the other way. So from here, I can start to grasp the concept of my pelvis and my spine and my head and how they kind of work together. So as I'm tilting my pelvis up, my pubic bone up toward my chin wants to reach away. As I send it down the other way, my chin kind of naturally comes back in. Meanwhile, the spine is just bobbing up and down in response to my pelvis, which is why we hammer on in Pilates about pelvic stability, because we like to have our pelvis stable, spine stable, upper and lower limb stable. It's a good foundation. So let's go to a nice stable pelvis, and then let's come into knee drop. So now I'm going to let my right knee drop out, and I'm trying to keep my left hip, knee and ankle aligned, and then alternate. Left side drops out, right hip, knee, ankle stable. So what you don't want to do with this one is just let it go too much far out that you have no control. Like that. That's sloppy and floppy. We don't like that. So the benefits also about keeping your pelvis still. It's not just about spinal stability. It's also about having your pelvis in the correct alignment so that your pelvic floor can switch on and your intrinsic deep muscles can switch on to work. And these muscles you don't necessarily feel, compared to if I was to tell you to squeeze your core or engage your glutes and core. You can feel that. That's more global external muscles. Deep intrinsic muscles work when you're stable. They're very important. Good. So from here, we're going to start to come a little bit deeper. We're going to internally rotate our femurs as we tilt our pubic bone up. And I'm going to go as far as I can, and then I'm going to start to lift my hips a little bit off the hedgehog, and then I'm going to drop my pelvis back down. Externally rotate my femurs as my pelvis goes forward. So internally rotate to draw the pubic bone up, a little bit of a lift. Externally rotate to bring it back down. External rotation. Alright, so let's think about this. Whatever my hip's doing, my pelvis is responding, my shoulders are responding, my neck is responding. Cool, eh? Alright, cool. Now we're going to take that out. Don't worry if your sacrum gets a little hot or a little aggravated, if it's got pressure on it. We're going to release that now. I have had clients say that it does kind of hurt their lower back a little bit. So long as it's not nerve pain, it's okay. Now I've got the hedgehogs and I've got the spiky side up. I'm popping them under my glutes. Again, if you don't have that, that's okay. Just do this on the ground. So here we're going externally rotate through the right side. Pelvis stays still. Extend that leg out long. Internally rotate to bring it back in. Externally rotate the left side. Keep the pelvis still. Slide the leg down. Internally rotate to bring it back in. I'm going to do about 3 on each side. So the challenge here is to keep your pelvis still. And it's a lot harder than anyone would think. Another really good way to think of keeping your pelvis still is to pop your fingers on your hip bones. And you can pretend that they're car lights. And you're trying to keep those car lights still toward the ceiling. This is a good glute release here. Alright, good. That's enough of our warming up there. Now from here we're going to come up into our bridge series or pelvic curl. We're going to really think about rotating through our hips. It's an internal rotation to start the movement and imprinting my lower back. And I'm just going to slowly start to peel my spine up as I allow my hips to roll in toward each other. Once I start to bring my pelvis up high, I'm going to resist the urge to pull my rib cage up anymore, and I'm just going to let my knees gently externally rotate so that when I look down, my rib cage, hips, knees are aligned. All 4 corners of the feet are connected. I'm just going to hold this here. As I come down, I'm going to think of releasing from my hips first. I'm going to initiate the movement by rolling my hips inward. And then it's almost like my spine just follows naturally, 1 vertebrae at a time. So the reason we articulate through our spine is we want to see how connected we are to those deep spine stabilizing muscles. If you find that you have trouble articulating through the spine, going up again with an internal rotation to imprint. If you find that you have a lot of trouble to do this, to really isolate, it means that this exercise is probably a little bit too advanced for you. But I wouldn't say run away from this exercise. I would say practice this exercise. But if you're going to practice this exercise, practice doing the articulation. Practice mindful movement. You know, when I do my daily practice, I usually only just do 1 exercise. I could explore the pelvic curl for about 30-40 minutes just to see how it feels. Like, how does my right side, can I roll both sides in equally? Does one side get stuck? And then I'll explore with variations, which we'll do next. I want you to hold your hips up high, and I want you to feel that your glutes aren't squeezing. Can you let go of your glutes and let your hamstrings kick on a little bit more? And then from there, I'm going to get you to lift up your right heel, lift up your left toe, and think about your hips staying in a perfect line. Try not to let the hips drop. Try not to squeeze the glutes. The reason I say this, they will kind of squeeze. See if you can actively turn it off. And the reason being is, I just want to see if we can work just with our intrinsic muscles. Can I turn off my big managerial muscles, and can I just get the little workers do their job? One more on each side. And then I'm going to just internally rotate my femurs and roll down one vertebrae at a time. From here, we're going to go straight into our roll-up series. This is quite challenging. I'm going to get you to start with your hands to the ceiling. You're going to take an inhale to bring your chin to your chest and peel up your upper body. And then exhale to take it back down. So hands move first, chin to chest, inhale. And then exhale to come back down. Now we add our roll up, but we're going to add our hips internally rotating. So inhale here. And then I'm going to exhale to rotate my femurs in and scoop into my belly and come all the way back up into a sitting position. If that is too advanced for you, then come straight up to this position and work on your roll down. Inhale here, rotate the femurs in first, allow for the scoop through the belly, allow for the pubic bone to draw up to the chest, and I'm just trying to find exactly the same amount of articulation. There's my tremor that I had when I was doing my pelvic curls. Inhale, exhale, reset, inhale, ooh, so it's definitely harder to come up. You want to try and keep your hamstrings or your heels on the ground, but that's quite hard. So if you can't do the roll up, just practice this. Inhale, find your articulation, and then exhale, scoop up. Good, going to do about 3 more. My hip spiraling goes, inhale as I flex. Exhale as I externally rotate my femurs. Inhale, internally rotate. Exhale, externally rotate. Think inhale, internal. Exhale, external rotation. One more. Inhale. Oh, and then exhale, sit it up nice and tall. Alright, so we're going to come over onto 4-point kneeling for our next exercises. Alright, so I'm at my 4-point kneeling position. I've got my knees under or slightly behind my hips, same with my shoulders, under, slightly forward. If you've got your Markaloo, go ahead and grab your timber frames to encourage some arch activation. Otherwise, just go ahead and go straight onto the palms of your hand. From here, I am just going to go into a cat-cow just to warm up, because I have just been lying on my back, so anytime we can get spinal mobility, we take it. But I'm thinking about, when I'm doing my cat-cow, I'm thinking of my hips are externally rotated when I'm in my cow. As I come under to my cat, I can feel that my hips internally rotate. And external, and internal, and external. I'm not going that deep, I'm just going with what my body feels like it needs. And then I'm just coming back to my neutral, so somewhere in between. So from here, I'm going to think about my hips spiraling in a 4-point kneeling position. So I'm going to curl my toes under. I'm going to think of starting to rotate my femurs in to encourage a little flexion in my lower back, and then I'm going to lift my knees off the ground and just hold. 3, 2, 1. and then going to go again. So I'm just internally rotating, keeping my lower back flex, scooping the belly. 3, 2, 1, inhale, exhale, lower. Okay, we're going to add a little bit more. This time I'm going to come up on an internal rotation with my hips, and then I'm going to externally rotate my hips a little bit. So I'm a little bit higher with my knees. My sit bones are out a little bit more. I'm just going to hold. 2, 1. One more, inhale. Rotate the femurs in, pull them up, externally rotate the femurs and hold for 3, 2, 1, and then come back down. So from here we're going to go into some planking with the hip variation. So we're going to start off with some single leg work. So I'm just going to slide one leg out and then I'm going to slide it back in. So a good thing to do is have the hedgehog sitting on your pelvis, or if you've got a cup of coffee, that's even better, because that's going to encourage our pelvic stability. So say we do about 4 on each side. Good. So on the opposite side, think about a little tiny internal rotation and then external rotation of the hip. Once you get into an extension position, internal rotation to bring it in. So you don't have to follow my points exactly, but don't just think of shoving the leg out there. Think of how are my hips moving in the socket. We've done all this hip work, so let's think about that. Good, and then hold that leg out there. This is an option. You can do another 4 on each side if this plank is too strong for you, but for those of you who want to work hard, when you slide your opposite leg out, think of your hips staying low. And then we're going to slide the right leg back in and then control the left leg back in. And this time we're going to extend the left leg out, push the ground away, press down into that foot, slide the opposite leg out, and bring the left leg in first, and then exhale to bring it in. Slide the right leg out, slide the left leg out, bring the right leg in, bring the left leg in. And we go one more in each time. The left leg out, right leg out, the left leg in, and then right leg in. Beautiful. Take the hedgehog off if you've got that on there. The last thing we're going to do on our series is what we call a pike, or it's also known as a downward dog in yoga, but we're going to do it with the idea of our hips moving correctly in the socket. So I'm going to internally rotate as I bring my hips up. By the time I get my hips all the way to the ceiling, they are externally rotated. And then I'm going to internally rotate to hover my knees down on the ground. Internally rotate, externally rotate once I'm up there. So hopefully you're starting to see the pattern. The internal rotation is the movement. The external rotation is the extension. I'm going to go for 3 more. Two. Last one. And coming back into our hands and knees. Awesome. So let's do a little bit more glute work. We're going to come on down to our side. Grab a pillow if you need it. Okay, I'm here for my side lying work. You can use a pillow for this, or you can just use your bicep. I like to just challenge my neck strength every now and then and just practice working off of a pillow, but if you are in pain or discomfort, use a pillow. So I'm going to imagine that I'm in between 2 glass panes here, and I'm just going to reach my top leg out nice and long. And from here, I'm going to really just take a second just to make sure I've got a pocket of air underneath the side of my body that's on the ground. And then I'm reaching my foot away before I start to find my hip socket. There it is. Good. So this is pelvic stability. We don't want to bring our foot too far forward or too far back that my pelvis is rocking or my lower back moves. So we're doing 10. And then once we've done 10, we take a reverse. So this is called your leg circles. It's simply rolling around your femur in your hip socket, femur spiral, and thinking of activating those little intrinsic muscles. Your glutes are going to feel worked, and I won't once tell you to squeeze your glutes. Now hold your foot still and just rotate your toe to the ground and rotate your toe to the ceiling. When you're doing this, can you feel at the end of each range, your glutes just activate or turn on? Doing 10 like this. This is surprisingly strong, this one. Notice how I've gone quiet. That means I'm counting numbers. If I'm counting numbers, that means that it's serious. Good. So then from there, I'm going to point my toe as I reach it up to the ceiling, and then I'm going to drag my heel back down to the start position. So this is super challenging to keep the pelvis still. You'll notice that I'll put my hand on the ground at some points, and that's just to grab an extra little bit of stability so I can support my pelvis. I'm going to do 10 like this. Hope that noise has just stopped. I think that's the refrigerator. Good distraction. 4, 3, 2, and 1. Last thing I'm going to do, point my toe down toward the ground, drop my toe to the ground, and then pick it back up to my hip height. It's 10 repetitions. Double check with the side of your body. Make sure you haven't collapsed. Everything's still in good form. It's really burning. 2, and then 1. Awesome. Good. Now I'm going to come straight up into a figure 4 position here. So my legs are bent in a Z shape. I'm trying to keep this hip down on the ground. If you need a block, you can pop a block there. Before we swap sides, we're just going to add a little bit of a twist and a rotation here. So we're going to come into a mermaid. So I'm going to reach my hands out to a T position, and then I'm thinking of tilting over, trying to keep my left hip grounded. Once my fingers tap the ground, I'm just going to stretch out the side of that body, bend into the elbow and look up. Come all the way down if you can. If you can't, work toward it. You might be able to go a little bit deeper on this one. This is a good hip opening exercise, even though it kind of doesn't necessarily feel like it if you've got really tight hips. It's more of a kind of mobility to have your legs in this position. So let's just swap straight over to the other side. So we are on the side, getting ready to do the same glute series. So sitting up, having a little bit of space underneath the side body, reaching that leg away nice and long, and we just start off with our circles. Spiraling the hip in the socket, 10 repetitions. It's different on this side for me. This hip is a lot less stable. and then reverse, keeping the pelvis nice and still. This hip likes to rock backwards and forwards a lot more than the other side, so I'm really closing this movement, making it smaller. I know my body and I know that this hip is quite unstable. 2, 1, holding my leg out straight, tapping the toe to the ground, reaching the toe to the ceiling, as if my heel is connected to a pole away from me and I'm just spiraling around that pole. Three, 2, and 1, keeping that toe to the ceiling, up, drag down, point the toe, drag the heel down. So same thing, I'm not going as far on this side. Already feeling my glutes working quite strong. I have to be really mindful that my hip flexor isn't doing all the work for me, so I'm going to make this range even less. 3, 2, and then 1, and then rotate my toe to the ground, tap down, and up, and 9, oh she's burning, and 8, feels good, 7, put my hand back down, help me stabilize, and 5, and 4, 3, 2, last one. Beautiful. And then coming straight back up for the mermaid again. Reaching my hands out into a T position, coming up and over, trying to ground that right hip down. Dropping that elbow a little bit lower. It's definitely tighter on the side. Notice how I can't get my elbow as low. And 1. That feels good. So thank you so much for joining me on this video covering the concept of the femur spiral again. So practice this program as often as you can over the next week or 2, and better yet, apply these principles to not just all of your Pilates classes, but also in your everyday life. Feel how your hips move when you walk, feel how your hips move when you drive, feel how your hips move when you run and kick, and just explore that pelvic, hip, lumbar kind of connection. So I will see you next week. I'm not going to give away what theme we'll be covering. You will see it in the class. Thank you and have an awesome evening.